Informamos que estamos com tradução simultânea.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And we heard a lot of discussion about innovation. We heard a lot of discussion about Okay, so far we've heard lots about innovation. We heard lots about cost saving. We heard a lot about efficiency. We heard a lot about creativity and crowdsourcing ideas. What I'm going to talk to you about in the next 40 minutes is how the UK government and in the UK as a whole, the public administration has used ICT, information technology, to improve the services and to transform public services or the public administration as a whole in the UK. The journey we've had so far since 1997, when the concept of electronic government or digital government was introduced to public administration in the UK. Okay? So, my name is Vishanth Weerakkody, and I'm a professor of digital governance at Brunel University Business School, and I also edit a journal called International Journal of Electronic Government Research. Okay, so the institution that I work for is called Brunel University. It's in West London, and it's a very large university with about 17,000 students. The university, 60% of our time is spent on teaching, and about 40% of our time as academics we spend on research. So we are a very research-led university that is very much focused on trying to solve societal problems, and my area of interest is digital government. So in the last 5 years, or the last 3 years in particular, we have secured around 60 million pounds from the European Commission on trying to solve societal problems, some of the problems that we discussed right now this morning. So our focus is not just teaching, but also research, and using that research, state-of-the-art research, to inform teaching. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about is the journey that we have had in terms of the use of technology in public administration from around 1997 to now. So the journey, the past, the present, and what is the future looking for us, and some of the challenges that we have faced that hopefully you can draw from as lessons when moving forward in this country. Okay, before I start that, I'd like to present to you this figure. So we are living in, when we talk about innovation, when we talk about cost saving, efficiency, we must not forget that we are living in the internet, the period of internet evolution. Yeah? The impact of innovation can be made bigger with the help of technology and with the speed that the internet is growing. So from the early period where we were used to computers, we are now going into an intelligence environment where reasoning and ubiquitous computing is the norm for most advanced societies. So how can we really harness the power of the internet to diffuse? You've done some good examples of crowdsourcing here. So, how can we really make impactful change? And somebody talked about in the morning evaluation. So everybody has ideas, but how do you actually consolidate these ideas to introduce big change that really has impact on policy and as a nation in terms of economy, in terms of sustainability, in terms of society, and of course the value to the public. Yeah? So everything that we talk about, it needs to be talked about in the context of the internet. We talk about Internet of Things, where people, buildings, transportation, energy, healthcare, everything is connected. So when we talk about innovation, it's very good to come up with grassroots ideas, but the most impactful ones would be when these ideas are really big and you harness the power of technology to implement some of these ideas. Okay? So Internet of Services, yeah? We are used to e-commerce, and we expect the same level of satisfaction and efficiency from public services now. Okay? Again, another way of looking at the internet evolution, where we start with the internet and we are now talking about internet of everything. Okay? So, within that context, what is the meaning of digital government? Brazilian government has an online portal that provides services to citizens, where citizens can transact and communicate with their government. But when we talk about the internet and the pace of the technological change, how do we actually position this electronic government or digital government? What is it? Is it about technology? Certainly innovation is being inspired by technology, and innovation has to be meaningful and timely and keep pace with technological change. So is digital government about technology, or is it about providing services to citizens that are more cost-effective, efficient, etc.? Okay? And is it actually about the community, yeah, and the value to the community? So, very important questions to answer is digital government or improved public services using ICT should be focusing about the needs of citizens and the value to citizens. It's about services that are responsive and of high quality. It's about improving trust in government. Trust is very important, because if citizens don't trust their government, no amount of technology is going to solve some of the problems that most governments face. It's about accessibility of services. Yeah, is it available 24/7, anywhere, from multiple devices, for instance? It's about the availability, yeah? And it's also about citizen satisfaction of using these services. I'm not going to be engaging with my government, or I'm not going to go into doing crowdsourcing if I'm not satisfied and if I don't trust my government, that the government is going to take action to actually implement some of my ideas. What is the motivation for me to actually go and contribute ideas? Okay? So it's about adding value, not just to myself as a citizen, but to the community. And also it's about reducing service errors. Okay? And it is also about change management for the whole of government. So I'm talking about all of these things. You need to keep in mind the internet revolution and how the pace of technology is dictating some of what we do. Okay? So in the UK, the kind of journey that we have had so far, in 1997, we introduced the concept of electronic government. The idea then was to have 100% of our services online by around 2005, when we started in 1997. And we managed to achieve, by 2007, 95% of our services were all online, where citizens could actually transact with government, do not have to go to the post office or rely on traditional transactions and paper. In 2007, the government realized that services were online. It was very similar to e-commerce, but the government was not saving costs. They were not improving the efficiency of internal processes. And they came up with the concept of transformational government. So the idea there was to focus on the internal organization or public administration as a whole in the back office. What are we doing in the back office? Have we actually ended up making our inefficient processes, putting them online? What have we really gained by doing that? Have we saved money? Have we saved cost? Have we improved efficiency? So these questions were still to be answered, and through transformational government, what the UK government set out to do was to transform the back office processes to reduce cost, to improve efficiency, streamline processes, and to change the way where government, public administration delivers governance to citizens, the way they interact with citizens, participation, inclusion, digital divide. All of this big picture kind of came to play prior to post-2007. So I'm going to skip that. So if you look at the literature, various literatures have actually identified how governments have progressed, including the United Nations and also Gartner Group. And the most famous is Lane and Lee, where they talk about starting with providing the right information to citizens into integration, and now we are talking about e-society and e-democracy. Okay, so that's the literature. And some of the principal boundaries of electronic government or digital government is focusing mainly, we are focusing mainly on citizens, but there is also government. Yeah? How do governments interact with other governments, local government agencies with each other? Digital diplomacy is very important. Yeah? And how do government administrations actually improve the accountability, transparency, efficiency of their workers? Public administration is big. It's a big institution. It's not just about the citizens. Okay? And also businesses. How do you facilitate and foster entrepreneurship? How do you create an environment for good business to foster, etc.? So, to me, through my research in the early days, going back 10 years from now, I had 3 basic principles of succeeding in e-government. So the whole idea in the UK was coming up with a one-stop government service portal. And to do that, the basic requirement was, the first thing was communication, okay, where you begin to inform citizens of things that are happening. The next thing is about collaboration. When you start collaborating with each other in government, you become, you enable transactional type of services, paying taxes, paying bills, etc. And then when you really begin to engage with the citizens, so I'm talking about e-democracy, e-participation, and inclusion of everybody, it's about coordination. So this is where we talk about transformation. You require real close coordination between government agencies, because government agencies provide services. Most of their transactions are all based on IT. And if you cannot integrate these IT systems, and if government agencies do not talk to each other, we cannot actually really begin to engage and inform the citizens. So this was 10 years ago when I was doing my research. And just a very quick picture of the kind of spending that we have had in the UK, billions of pounds at the height of the e-government movement or digital government spending, 208 billion, 180 pounds per household was spent on trying to make services online to engage with citizens. Financially tangible savings was the main goal in addition to the efficiency, transparency, availability, etc. But the return on investment is still a big question. Okay? And in the UK, we have focused very much on multi-channel service delivery from the very early stages, where we use digital TV, for instance, to allow citizens to interact with the government web portal. Freeview television, available to all through an antenna, where they could visit the government website. This is the previous government website, which has now changed. Around 29 million visits were recorded in 2010 to this DirectGov web portal, which has now been discontinued. Okay? And now the web portal is gov.uk. I'll talk about gov.uk in a minute. And mobile phones were also used, and the mobile penetration in the UK is quite high, 92% in 2014. So it was multi-channel service delivery was the focus. And the academic researchers like myself and my colleagues have tried to understand what's happening, what are the benefits. You know, we do research of real events and try to classify the benefits and also the challenges, which I'm not going to go through now. This is boring academic research. But what we've tried to do is try to give some meaning to what's really happening in this world when the concept was new. But the empirical lessons so far have taught some very important lessons about, you know, try to avoid e-enabling services that were inefficient. Improve the services first. Improve the processes internally first before you make them available to citizens through electronic means. Okay? Otherwise, you're going to create a faster mess. If you create online services based on inefficient processes, the mess is going to get only faster. Okay? And also IT, when you talk about IT, be careful when you are implementing IT systems in government agencies. Avoid fragmentation. So small ideas are good, but there needs to be a cohesive, high-level strategy of how you go about improving public administration and IT. You have to be very, very careful of not fragmenting the landscape. And also things like training and cohesive change management strategies within central government that can be triggered down to local administrations to follow frameworks, guidelines, with some room for flexibility. Okay? Training, very, very important, because when we talk about public administration, we talk about people who are quite safe in their jobs, traditional thinkers, do not want to change. So training is very, very important to change the attitude of people working in public administration. Some theories that have been used by people like myself and researchers around the world to study the implementation, because implementation has been a big thorn for most government agencies, and they have been challenged with the same type of issues year on for the last 20 years. We are still talking about some of the same issues. So it's important to kind of link the academic world, like what you're doing here, to involve the academic community in trying to understand how to go about transforming public administration. So theories are very, very important and should not be ignored. Okay? Some of the theories that have been applied in public administration studies, and I'm very fond of business process re-engineering, because we are talking about re-engineering traditional bureaucratic organizations when we talk about change in public administration. One of the other big problems is, let's say we manage to transform these services, getting citizens to use the services. Citizens are usually used to traditional services. How do you change that mindset? Yeah? Adoption is a big, big, big problem when we talk about digital services. Okay? And inclusion. Do we manage to include everybody? The elderly people, the disabled people, people who are less in terms of societal level of income, who do not have access to computers, broadband. So all of these things are kind of issues that governments need to be taking into consideration when we talk about digital government and diffusing digital government services. Okay, so e-inclusion is a very, very important aspect, because not everybody is computer literate. There are elderly people, there are people who do not have access to computers. How do we really include and involve these people and avoid this digital divide? In the UK, this is a big, big problem. Yeah? So the digital divide and the social, are we excluding people from society by making services online and digital by default? In the UK, it's the story of digital by default. Everything has to be online. Okay? So things that you need to be aware of. And it's very interesting, because if you look at the UK population as a whole and the use of internet, 83% of the population actually in 2010 were using the internet. E-commerce, about 60%, but e-government or public services, only around 40% of the people were engaged. You might be wondering why 2010, there isn't any statistics published after the 2010 studies have been undertaken. So there's a big gap here, 40% to 80%. So where are these people and what are they doing of not interacting with e-government services or digital government services? So the concept of inclusion is important, and trying to understand when we go about changing with the Internet of Technologies and Internet of Services, how do we actually manage this and consider the needs of society and ensure that everybody is included. So there have been many, many strategies over the years. Every year the EU has come up with strategies during the height of the e-government or digital government movement of different strategies of e-inclusion. Have they worked? Still to be debated. But we still have a huge problem of digital divide and inclusion in the UK. So very many scholars have come up with various theories to try to understand the problems with inclusion and adoption. And many studies in the academic world have been published. And how many of these have actually been taken into consideration by the UK government or governments anywhere, to be honest? Yeah? So what we try to do is try to give meaning to things that are happening in the real world and try to tackle problems using some theoretical dimension. Maybe the theories are irrelevant, but at least somebody has to try to give meaning to better understanding. So again, the academic world is very, very important when trying to go about change and transformation in the public sector. And e-participation, yeah, so everybody has to be participating, and you talk about crowdsourcing. To me, it's another way of participation in public sector transformation, coming up with ideas. So is your voice really heard? Yeah? And what are the mechanisms that you can actually put in place to improve e-participation? This is a very nice example from nearly 15 years ago when we were introducing a digital government to the UK. Council by the name of Lewisham came up with this idea, and do you know what that means? This was back in early 2000s. I like this example, and I use it many, many times. Really engaging the citizens. Yeah? What this does is you can take a picture of graffiti or a pothole or a broken wall somewhere. Yeah? And then you can post it onto the council website or send an email, and they will repair it, and you can track the progress of what's being happening to your request, and then they will put a picture before and after. This is way back in 2006, right? 10 years ago, almost. Another example of a broken wall. So a citizen takes a picture of that, sends it to the council. Council takes action to repair it, and then I feel satisfied because I'm participating in actually making some change and improving the community and the society that I live in. Okay? And another very nice example from over 10 years ago, Jeremy will like this very much, fixmystreet.com. Okay? If I have potholes on my street, if I have graffiti or if I have bins that are full, I can take a picture, I can put the postcode, yeah, and I can make complaints. And this is completely done by, it's not by the government, it was started by normal community, yeah, NGOs, people, businesses. Okay, it's not run by government, but it's massively popular because it helps us to solve our own community-based problems. So evaluation, somebody talked about evaluation, and to me evaluation is very important. You know, you can change, you can improve using technology, but how do we actually evaluate the impact of this change on society? Okay? And so for the public agency, and also to understand the gaps between transformation and impact. And this is where the evaluation actually comes into play. When we talk about citizens, you know, we talk about things like trust, privacy, confidence. When we talk about public agencies, their motivation is to improve efficiency, availability, accessibility, transparency, these kind of things. And for citizens, it's about trust, privacy, and confidence. So how do we actually fuse these things together and come up with a cohesive plan of evaluation to look at the impact? So this is the kind of the past for me, at least, of what sort of things have taken place in terms of transformation and the use of ICT. Now, what are the priority areas right now and moving forward? Okay, so it's about open government, it's about open data, it's about big data, and it's about this concept of statecraft, or government as a platform. We had government as a portal, now we are talking about government as a platform. Okay, so in Europe, broadly speaking, the priority areas for research and development, where funding, the European Commission funds research in this area every year. They're talking about participation and co-creation, governance and policy modeling. Yeah? So these are the priority areas. How do we get citizens to engage and to co-design, to co-produce services? How can we get citizens to participate in policy-making processes, like the crowdsourcing example here? Okay? And how do we collect feedback from citizens? And also, the main concept is how do we get citizens to contribute to policy-making and to change that can happen within public administration. So all of this is is kind of fitting into this concept of open government in the UK and most parts of Europe, right? And here when we talk about open government, we actually talk about connected statecraft. How do we connect the different aspects of government, agencies, resources, stakeholders, citizens together to deliver an open and transparent government? When this is borrowed from the US, which emerged in the 1990s, and it's becoming prominent in the UK, but it's all about connectivity and collaboration. So my concept of the 3 C's, communication, collaboration, and coordination becomes prominent again here because we're talking about collaboration and connectivity and governance. But when we talk about connectivity and governance, we must not forget that we have a history, a prehistory, where we had no ICT in the public sector, right? We also had a period where individual well-being was kind of independent of ICT. We had ICT, but we were not dependent on ICT. Now we are in a period where individual and social well-being is dependent on ICT. Because the Internet of Services, Internet of Everything, that's what is driving innovation. And the technological change is so fast that innovation is meaningless if we do not place it within that context. Okay? So how do we actually go about open government and open statecraft when we have a huge history of 200-300 years of history in public administration in a country like the UK? Okay? So the concept of statecraft talks about skillful management of state affairs, but it requires great deliberation, participation, openness, transparency, engagement, etc. Okay? The problem is we are trying to run a 21st century public administration using 20th century systems on top of 19th century political structures. Okay? This I have this, the John Pollack from MIT is very relevant to the UK because we have a huge history in public administration and we are trying to fit in that internet revolution, Internet of Services and everything into structures that are aging structures that are very difficult to change. Okay? So we should not get carried away. You need to understand how we can actually fit all of this together. So the push is there. That's just a reminder of moving from big government to big society. So that's the idea. How can government redefine the relationship that they have right now with the citizens to make everything more open? Yeah. And we are focusing on several concepts to improve and to introduce the statecraft concept of statecraft and open government. We're focusing on several reforms that is centered on localism, local government reform, welfare reform, open public services, civil service reform as a whole, concept of shared services, and transparency and openness. These are the buzzwords that are being floated around at the moment in public administration in the UK. Okay? Maybe things might change. We have election in May, and maybe something else might come up after the election. You never know. Okay? But this is the thinking right now. And the effort is actually focused on 24 services. Now, this is the introduction of open government, or government as a platform, they call it. Focusing on 5 services, 14 agencies, and 8 departments. And all driven by the digital by default strategy that was published a couple of years ago, where everything has to be digital now. First of all, let's go and introduce some exemplar services. Yeah, we have something that's working already very well from the e-government, the digital government movement that has taken place within the last 20 years. Let's get these services online and onto our platform as exemplar services. Let's not forget the people who cannot use IT and have this concept of assisted digital, where we have third-party organizations or individuals giving a hand to those disabled, the elderly, who cannot use ICT and who cannot interact with digital government, so assisted by digital. Identity assurance to ensure that fraud does not take place and security and privacy is maintained. And the concept of digital inclusion to ensure that nobody is left out in this journey of digital transformation. And the government has published a technology code of practice that each government agency and local government needs to follow when they go about change. So frameworks, guidelines, strategies to follow. And in all of this, the idea of data science becomes very important, because now we are talking about transparency, using openly available resources such as the big data. Data is being made available to the public, and the public can use the big data that is made available to make decisions, to improve their community, their lives. Businesses can exploit the open data. So the idea of this data science, the volume, the velocity, and variety of resources that are available becomes important. And the concept of platform. So I said that we have moved from government as a portal to government as a platform. Okay? So the idea of the platform is that everything is consolidated in one location, where we allow businesses, application developers, good practice providers to consolidate and to contribute to providing all of the services that citizens require through this platform. Okay? So the idea here is to facilitate participation, co-creation, co-design, and consolidate everything in one location to make it more easier for citizens to access and to use and to transact with government. So I've got a video here where the, which I want, it's a 1-minute video that talks about government as a platform, and that's the way we are moving. It's not working, it's okay. No, that's fine. Just leave it, yeah. Okay, okay, I'm not going to go through the video. It's a 1-minute video that explains what the government as a platform is. But the idea there is to allow everybody to contribute, businesses, community, so that we have one consolidated location where we can really start interacting with government and contributing to public services and policy making, etc. Okay. Now. Screen has frozen. Sorry, the screen has frozen. Maybe close it and open it again. Alt Control Shift. Technology. It's quite a heavy presentation anyway. It's quite, in terms of megabytes, I think it's quite big, and probably it struggled to, when I... Just close it entirely and open it up again. Alt Control Delete and okay, yeah. No, don't forget the internet, just open the presentation. Presentation. screen. Right, so the government as a platform concept is talking about use of open data, open interfaces, and open standards to improve transparency, participation, and accessibility. This is nothing new. We talked about these things 15 years ago when the concept of digital government was introduced to public administration. Okay? So the new website, we had the DirectGov website when e-government was introduced 15, 16 years ago. And now we have moved on to this website called gov.uk, which is a platform. And here are some statistics. Some statistics of use of the gov.uk platform. You can see most of the people use the platform using a computer, but also people are using tablets and mobile devices. And if I click here, I was going to show you, you can see how many people are logged on to the platform right now. Okay? So this is the kind of thinking right now at the moment: open statecraft, open government, and government as a platform. I want to finish the presentation and show you Gov platform if it does work, the internet. But we have to be careful of warnings moving ahead. Okay, press is quite critical of what things that are happening in the UK because we are doing these things at the expense of the taxpayer. Okay. So we talk about water problems. Recently there was a big IT system that failed where farmers were going to use and this concept of shared economy. So there are lots of great ideas, but you have to understand the context and you have to understand the history. Okay? So it's a very, very complex environment that we are dealing with when we talk about public administration. If you want change, if you want improvement, if you want efficiency, small is good, but big is better, but big is more complex. Okay? And lots of ideas that are being discussed at the moment, and variety of approaches are emerging in this transformation journey, talking about public value, frameworks, guidelines, etc. And these are very, very important. Okay? So the statecraft idea, which I want to leave you with, is actually trying to move UK public administration, which is like this, very vertical, strict hierarchical roles, strict communication protocols, dependency on those at the top. Policymakers are at the top, politicians. They have their own agendas for 4 years, maybe for 8 years, right? Massive walls protecting these politicians and policymakers against civil society and the taxpayer. We are trying to move this to this. Okay? So the concept of the prehistory and the history is very important, and we cannot forget. We have to understand the pace of change of the internet and technologies, but at the same time we have to understand the history of the country and public administration as a whole. And this is why the same old challenges, the same old problems keep cropping up every now and again. We redefine some of the concepts, we give it new names, but it's the same cycle that's going round and around. And it's important to, I'm not criticizing, but it's important to understand and be critical and analytical when moving forward. And the concept of collaboration becomes very important. My diagram that I showed to you when I started, it's about 15 years ago when I started my research. They're still talking about collaboration here. It's the same old things with different badges. Okay? So that's where the role of researchers becomes very important in helping public administrators to really understand how to go about change. And of course, we must not forget public value. This is now being floated around in Europe and in the UK as a very important concept. So if we introduce innovations and change, what is the value that we are creating of these changes and innovations to individuals and society as a whole? The services, their impact individually and to the community, and what value does it really give to individuals and community? If not, stakeholders, including citizens, are not going to buy in to the transformation journey. And the idea of co-production is important. We are moving participation to another level where we are involving citizens to actually redefine service, the way services are delivered real time. Okay? So that's my talk. And I'd like to leave you with a number of projects that I'm currently involved in, which are funded by the European Commission, all R&D projects that focus on innovation in different areas of public administration and civic society. So what we are trying to do is trying to better understand how to inform policymakers. Whether the policymakers listen or not is a different story, but as researchers, as academics, it's our responsibility to understand and to add to the knowledge and also to the confusion. Okay, thank you very much. If I have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Alguma pergunta? Agora pode ser feito em português. Não? Não? Então, agradecendo ao professor Vishanth por sua apresentação, nós convidamos neste momento o professor da Universidade de Lavras e também membro da organização deste evento, deste congresso, senhor Paulo Bermejo, para a entrega de uma pequena lembrança ao nosso palestrante. Por favor, senhor Paulo.
You can ask the question and I'll repeat the question. I'll repeat the questions for people too.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on a fantastic presentation. You managed to squeeze in so much in a short time.
Thank you.
But I have one question, or I have many questions, but when you pointed out that the use of eGov was only 40% and the use of e-commerce was 80 or something like that, yeah? When people say this, they forget one thing. I'm sure you know. But what eGov is offering is not the same as what e-commerce is offering,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So you expect it to be lower because eGov is traditionally offering administrative services, like getting a new passport, applying for kindergarten, applying for university. How often do you use those services?
Yeah.
Not often. Yeah? So we have to recognize that actually 40–50% is actually very, very good.
Yeah.
Right? Given the current state of eGov services.
Yes.
Now, when we move to co-created services, where citizens are involved in creating their own services, which happens especially at the local city level, then we start to see a rise in that. And there's also already data from that from Europe, yeah?
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that, 40% is not bad.
Yeah.
Seriously, yeah?
Yes. And this was 2010. I actually searched for some statistics of recent and I couldn't find. I think that the idea is even more important now when we talk about co-creation, as you said, and voluntary participation. That's where the real stimulation needs to take place and the satisfaction and that public value concept and ideas become relevant. So I think, as you say, I agree. And how many times do we actually tax our car? It's once a year. How many times does a student apply for a loan? It's once in their lifetime, probably. So, yeah, so all of that needs to be taken into context. The whole thing is about the return on investment and the value that it adds to community and also changing policy and improving society as a whole.
Temos tempo para mais uma pergunta. Tem mais alguma?
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Então, agora sim, convidamos o professor Paulo. Professor Paulo, por gentileza. Senhoras e senhores, faremos agora um intervalo para o almoço. Informamos que serão disponibilizados ônibus para alguns restaurantes próximos aqui de nosso evento. Nossas recepcionistas estarão aqui fora para orientá-los e prestar quaisquer informações. Informamos ainda que retornaremos às 14 horas com atividades realizadas simultaneamente neste auditório com a palestra O Sistema 6